Welcome to The Voice America. Today we'll be discussing on the key behind Donald Trump's health. But before we continue, do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to always get updated on our latest video. Let's begin. While the country as an entire was made aware during a pretty timely fashion that former President Trump was hospitalized with COVID back in October 2020, we only found during this past February, when the Night Times broke the story, that the then president had actually been much sicker than his team had allowed the country to know at the time. Because it clothed what actually happened during Trump's COVID hospitalization was more dramatic than we'd realized. In fact, before he was finally taken to Reed National Military Center for treatment, those on the brink of him believed he would wish to be put onto a ventilator. These concerns were well-founded, as he had been found to possess lung infiltrates, which appear on an X-ray when a severe infection has caused fluid or bacteria to inflame the lungs. It is a known symptom of a severe case of COVID. Further, his blood oxygen level had dipped into the 80s. COVID is taken into account severe when blood oxygen dips into the lower 90s. At the time, however, the general public wasn't told any of this. Because it seems there may are a stimulating reason that the White House kept the state of President Trump's health quiet, even before COVID. Few things create concern, instability, and lack of religion within the potential longevity of an administration than the ailing health of a president. Considering Trump was already gearing up to run a second term back in 2019, if his health was poor or he required medical attention at that time, he wouldn't have wanted anyone to understand. In her new book I'll Take Your Questions Now, Stephanie Grisham, Trump's former press secretary and First Lady Melania Trump's chief of staff, discusses a mysterious visit to Walter Reed Center Trump had back in 2019. While she doesn't outright ever name the procedure, she makes clear hints that it had been for a typical colonoscopy, something a person of Trump's age would normally have done as a routine evaluation. So why does this matter? Due to the secrecy and outright lies Grisham claims surrounded this particular visit and other things having to try to do with Trump's health throughout his presidency. She says that this hospital visit, which was whispered and speculated about at the time, created weeks of worry about the then president's health, albeit telling his staff, and therefore the public, that it had been a standard colonoscopy would have likely quelled the rumors. So why the secrecy? Grisham claims that Trump didn't want then Vice President Pence to officially take over power while he was sedated and incapable of doing his duties. She says he also did not want to be the butt of a joke on late-night television. The planet was at a loss for words when former President Donald Trump took to his favorite social media platform and tweeted that he and his wife, Melania Trump, had been diagnosed with COVID-19 in October 2020. It had been truly shocking to listen to the previous reality TV star admit that he and therefore the First Lady had fallen ill with an epidemic he spent the bulk of the year downplaying and spreading false information about. To be honest, none folks thought we'd see the day, via The Atlantic. What was even more shocking was that shortly after his tweet was sent out, Trump was airlifted to Reed National Military Center, where he spent 3 days receiving treatments that weren't widely available to the many people that had contracted the illness, including the 500,000+ people that died as a result of COVID-19, via CNN. It was like unbelievable, he said of the experimental Regeneron cocktail days after being released from the hospital. I felt good immediately. I felt nearly as good 3 days ago as I do now. Trump also took to Twitter when he returned to the White House, telling his followers, "Don't be scared of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We've developed, under the Trump administration, some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago." But what actually happened during Trump's battle with the illness? As we all know, the coronavirus impacts the systema respiratorium and may make it difficult for those infected with the virus to breathe via web. So when a video of Donald Trump running up the steps of the White House like he was trying to be Rocky Balboa while seriously struggling to breathe started making the rounds on social media, via Business Insider, people from everywhere wondered if Trump was really feeling nearly as good as he led people to think. During a new book titled Nightmare Scenario, Inside the Trump Administration's Response to the Pandemic That Changed History, written by The Washington Post's Damian Paletta and Yasmeen Abutaleb, The reporters alleged that Trump's aides were seriously concerned that the president might die of COVID-19. They also report within the book that his condition was worse than he disclosed, as his oxygen levels dipped into the 80s at one point, and he was placed on oxygen so as to stabilize him. The reporters also allege that doctors had considered putting Trump on a ventilator. At least two of these who were briefed on Trump's medical condition that weekend said he was gravely ill and feared that he wouldn't make it out of read. An adapted excerpt from Nightmare Scenario reads, via the Washington Post. People on the brink of Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, said he was consumed with fear that Trump might die. We're stating the apparent here, but once Donald Trump returned to the White House after his experience with the virus, he continued to obtrude misinformation about COVID-19 and even held maskless rallies after his release from the hospital, via The Guardian. In Damian Paletta and Yasmeen Abutaleb's book, Nightmare Scenario, Inside the Trump administration's response to the pandemic that changed history, the reporters allege that Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Robert Redfield, who Trump's team of doctors called after his diagnosis, hoped that Trump's experience would change him and his message about COVID-19, the risks of the disease, the way to best prevent it, and more. Redfield was watching on television from home. He was praying as Trump went up the steps. Praying that he would reach the balcony and show some humility. That he would remind folks that anyone might be vulnerable to the coronavirus, even the president, the primary lady and their son. An excerpt from the book reads, via the Washington Post. That he would tell them how they might protect themselves and their loved ones. However, after Trump made a show of running up the White House stairs, Redfield knew that the COVID-19 nightmare within the White House and America would remain an equivalent. Right then, Redfield knew it had been over. Trump showed there in moment that he hadn't changed in the least, the excerpt reads. The pandemic response wasn't getting to change either. Donald Trump's administration gave 1,000,001 reasons why the previous president could dodge the COVID-19 vaccine when it had been first released in December. He'd already had COVID. Former Surgeon General Jerome Adams said Trump had just been given a special antibody treatment. So it came as something of a surprise when in his CPAC speech, Trump, who was an early COVID denier and a known anti-vaxxer, came forward to urge his wary supporters to get their shots. Now, it's been revealed that Trump and former First Lady Melania had actually been vaccinated against the coronavirus back in January. What's not known is which vaccine they received, via Axios. On when, Jim Acosta's sources confirmed that it had been while Trump was still president, via Twitter. Trump's secret vaccination bucked the trend, which had incumbent President Joe Biden and predecessors Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama committing to urge vaccinated publicly to convince everyone that the shots were safe, via NBC. UNC professor of public health behavior Noel Brewer told ABC in December that what is extremely effective has leaders get up for the vaccination system and for individual vaccines. Having them offer to urge vaccinated on camera is one among the only most vital things that would happen. Trump critics are now even more angry with the previous president, particularly because the Night Times points out Trump was and still appears to be more concerned about getting credit for vaccine development than actually getting people inoculated against the virus. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to always get updated on our latest video.